Ambassador Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and watched the blue-skinned Zephyrian across from him wave his tentacles in another dismissive gesture. The creature had been doing this for 3 weeks now, and Jake was getting tired of it. Behind the Zephyrian, the insect-like hive mind representatives buzzed their wings in what Jake had learned meant disapproval. Everything humans suggested got the same response from them. The meeting room on Centauri Station was huge, with a dome ceiling that showed the stars outside. 47 different alien species had representatives sitting around the circular table, each one looking different from the others. Some breathed different air, some needed special lights, and some made sounds instead of talking. Jake had spent 5 years learning how to work with all of them. Today was supposed to be the final day of negotiations about mining rights in the Kepler system. The humans wanted fair working conditions for the miners and safety standards that would protect everyone. The aliens wanted cheap labor and maximum profits. It was the same argument they had been having since Jake arrived at the station. Lisa Harper, Jake's economic advisor, leaned over and whispered in his ear, "They are not going to give us anything we asked for, Jake. Look at their body language." Jake nodded and looked around the room. Lisa was right. The crystal beings called resonants were glowing dark red, which meant they were angry. The machine-like collective representatives had their optical sensors focused on their data screens, ignoring the humans completely. Even the peaceful Aquarians were making the gurgling sound that meant they were frustrated. Captain Ryan Cole, the military liaison, sat on Jake's other side. The tall man had been quiet all morning, but Jake could see the tension in his shoulders. Ryan had served in 3 different galactic conflicts and knew when a situation was about to get worse. Council Speaker Vexitar raised one of his forearms to get everyone's attention. The Zephyrian leader was old even by his species standards, and his blue skin had faded to a pale gray. His voice came through the universal translator with a mechanical tone that made everything sound cold and distant. "The human proposal for worker safety standards is rejected," Vexitar announced. "Such measures would reduce mining efficiency by 12%. This is unacceptable to the council majority." Jake felt his jaw tighten. "Speaker Vexitar, we are talking about living beings here. The mining operations in Kepler 442b use toxic gases that can kill workers in minutes without proper protection." "Emotional responses," Vexitar replied with another tentacle wave. "Humans always let their primitive feelings interfere with logical business decisions. The council has decided that maximum resource extraction is the priority." The buzzing from the hive mind section got louder. Jake looked over and saw that their compound eyes were all focused on him now. The translation device on the table crackled to life with their mechanical voice. "Hive Mind Collective agrees with speaker judgment. Human emotional weakness causes inefficient outcomes. Survival of individual units is less important than productivity of colony." Jake looked around the room again and saw the same expression on every alien face. They were all in agreement. The humans were outnumbered, outvoted, and dismissed. Again. Lisa passed him a data tablet showing the latest mining casualty reports. In the past year alone, over 3,000 beings had died in Kepler system mines because of poor safety equipment and dangerous working conditions. Most of them were from smaller species that had no voice in the council. The big powers like the Zephyrians and the hive mind just saw them as replaceable workers. "What about the miners' rights agreement we signed 2 years ago?" Jake asked, standing up from his chair. "Article 7 clearly states that all mining operations must meet basic safety standards." "That agreement was written by humans," said Counselor Hexara from the Crystal Resonant faction. Her voice sounded like wind chimes being hit by a hammer. "It contains too many protective measures that slow down progress. The Council has voted to modify those requirements." "Modify them how?" Captain Cole asked, speaking for the first time all day. "By removing most of them," Vexitar replied without any emotion in his voice. "The new mining protocols will focus on speed and efficiency. Safety measures will be optional and decided by individual mining companies." Jake felt something snap inside his chest. For 5 years he had sat in rooms like this one, listening to aliens talk about living beings like they were just numbers on a spreadsheet. He had watched species after species get exploited, enslaved, or wiped out because they were too small to fight back. And every time the humans had tried to help, tried to find compromise, tried to make things better. But nothing ever changed. The strong took what they wanted from the weak, and the council just made it legal. Jake looked at Lisa and Ryan. Both of them were watching him with tired eyes. They had all been fighting this same battle for years, and they were losing. The aliens saw human compassion as weakness, human ethics as inconvenience, and human solutions as primitive thinking. Ambassador Morrison, Vextar said in his cold voice, "Do you have anything else to add to this discussion? Or can we move on to signing the new protocols?" Jake looked around the room one more time. 47 different species, each one more advanced than humanity in some way. Better technology, longer lives, greater intelligence, stronger bodies. But not one of them seemed to care about doing the right thing. He stood up slowly and picked up his briefcase. Lisa and Ryan looked surprised, but they started gathering their papers too. "Ambassador Morrison, where are you going?" Vextar asked. "The negotiations are not finished." Jake stopped at the door and turned back to face the council. "Yes, they are finished, Speaker. The human delegation withdraws from these proceedings. We will be returning to Earth immediately." The room went completely silent. Even the buzzing from the hive mind stopped. In 847 years of Galactic Council history, no species had ever just walked out of negotiations. "You cannot leave," Vextar said, and for the first time there was emotion in his voice. It sounded like panic. "The protocols must be signed by all council members." "Then you should have thought about that before you decided our opinions did not matter," Jake replied. "Contact us when you are ready to negotiate in good faith. Until then, humanity has other things to do." Jake walked through the door, followed by Lisa and Ryan. Behind them, the council chamber erupted into chaos as 46 different species all started talking at once in 46 different languages. But the humans did not look back. 3 hours later, the USV Endeavour was 3 jump points away from Centauri Station and heading toward Earth. In the ship's communication room, messages were already pouring in from across the galaxy. Mining disputes, trade conflicts, territorial arguments, and technical problems, all of them asking for human help. Jake deleted every single message without reading them. Captain Danny Foster was fixing a broken water recycling system on Theta Proxima when his communication device started beeping. The red light meant it was an emergency message from the Mechanical Collective, the robot-like species that ran most of the mining operations in this sector. Danny wiped the grease from his hands and opened the message. The robots were having problems with their main processing centers again. 3 of their biggest facilities had shut down in the past 24 hours, and they could not figure out why. The message was marked as urgent and requested immediate human engineering support. Danny looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back a short reply. "Human engineering teams are no longer available for council operations." He sent the message and went back to work on the water system. Across the galaxy on the medical station orbiting Vega Prime, Dr. Amy Watson was packing her equipment when her own emergency alert came in. The Vorthan Confederacy was reporting a disease outbreak in their farming colonies. Thousands of plant-based Vorthans were getting sick from some kind of infection that was spreading through their root systems. Amy had seen this type of plague before. 2 years ago, she had developed a treatment that could stop it in just a few days. The Vorthans had never bothered to learn how to make the medicine themselves. They just called Amy whenever they had problems. She read the panicked message twice, then sent back the same reply Danny had used. "Human medical teams are no longer available for council operations." Amy sealed her last equipment case and headed for the transport ship back to Earth. On the communication station near Jupiter, tech specialist Kevin Liu was shutting down the translation networks he had built over the past 8 years. The systems allowed 47 different alien species to talk to each other without confusion. Before Kevin's work, council meetings had been chaos because nobody could understand anybody else properly. Kevin's communication device was buzzing constantly now. Messages were coming in from all over the galaxy, as species discovered they could not talk to each other anymore without human help. The crystalline resonance could only communicate through light patterns. The gas-based nebulon spoke in chemical signals. The silicon builders used electromagnetic pulses. Kevin had spent years learning all of their languages and building machines that could translate between them. Now those machines were being turned off one by one as human technicians returned to Earth. Back on Centauri Station, Council Speaker Vextar was discovering what it meant to run a galactic government without human mediators. The Keith Empire and the Aquarian Federation had been arguing about water rights in the Sirius system for 6 hours. Without humans to help them find a compromise, the argument was getting worse every minute. The Keth were a warrior species that solved most problems by fighting. The Aquarians were peaceful but stubborn when it came to protecting their water supplies. Normally, a human diplomat would have found some creative solution that made both sides happy. Vextar tried using traditional Zephyrian harmony singing to calm down the two groups. The low musical sounds that worked perfectly with other Zephyrians had the opposite effect on everyone else. The Aquarians started making angry gurgling noises. The Keth representatives began reaching for their weapons. "This is insulting," declared War Chief Grok of the Keth Empire. "Your singing sounds like the mating calls of our livestock animals." "The harmony frequencies interfere with our biological processes," complained Admiral Splash of the Aquarian Federation. "It is making our water sacs vibrate painfully." Vextar stopped singing and looked around the council chamber. Half the seats were empty now. Several species had left the station after the humans departed, saying they had urgent business to attend to back home. The ones who remained were arguing about everything from trade routes to territorial boundaries. Counselor Hexara of the Crystalline Resonance was glowing bright red, which meant she was extremely agitated. Her voice came through the translators like breaking glass. "Where are the humans? They always knew how to make species cooperate who had nothing in common with each other." "The humans abandoned their responsibilities," buzzed the hive mind representative. "This proves their emotional weakness. Strong species adapt. Weak species flee." But even as the insect-like creature spoke, Vextar could see that the hive mind was struggling too. Their complex society depended on constant communication between millions of individual bugs. The translation systems that helped them coordinate with other species were failing without human maintenance. On the other side of the galaxy, the first real crisis was starting. A cargo ship carrying food supplies to the outer colonies had broken down in deep space. The ship belonged to the Traders Guild, a group that included members from 12 different species. Normally, they would have called for human rescue teams who knew how to work with all the different technologies on board. Instead, they sent distress calls to their own species' governments. The problem was that each species wanted to send their own rescue ships using their own methods. The reptilian scalers wanted to use their slow but reliable ships. The bird-like flyers insisted their fast scouts could reach the cargo vessel first. The underwater swimmers claimed their pressure-resistant ships were the safest option. While the 12 species argued about who should handle the rescue, the cargo ship drifted further into a dangerous asteroid field. The crew inside was running out of air and food, but nobody could agree on a rescue plan because nobody trusted anybody else's technology. Back on Earth, Admiral Carl Washington was reading reports from observers scattered across the galaxy. Every few hours, another crisis popped up somewhere in Council space. Mining equipment failures, communication breakdowns, trade disputes, territorial conflicts, and technical problems that would normally be solved in minutes by human specialists. "Sir," said Lieutenant Peter Brooks, walking into the Admiral's office with a data pad, "we are receiving requests for help from 17 different systems. Most of them are marked as emergency priority." Admiral Washington looked at the list of requests: medical emergencies, engineering failures, diplomatic crises, and rescue operations. All the things that humans had been handling quietly for years, while the Council focused on bigger political issues. "Send the same response to all of them," the Admiral said calmly. "Human forces are unavailable for Council operations at this time." Lieutenant Brooks hesitated. "Sir, some of these are life-or-death situations. The cargo ship near Beta Centauri has 6 hours of air left." "I understand, Lieutenant, but those species voted to exclude human opinions from Council decisions. They said our emotional responses were primitive and inefficient. Let them solve their own problems using their superior logic." The lieutenant left the office to send the messages. Admiral Washington turned back to his reports and tried not to think about the people who were going to die because 46 alien species could not work together without human help. On the ancient archive station at the edge of Council space, Senior Librarian Zixpol was watching centuries of galactic knowledge disappear. The massive computer systems that stored information from every known civilization were crashing one by one. The archive used technology from 37 different species, all connected by human-designed integration systems. Without human technicians to maintain the delicate balance between incompatible technologies, the whole system was falling apart. Priceless historical records, scientific discoveries, and cultural treasures were being lost forever as alien computers refused to communicate with each other. Zixpol sent desperate messages to Earth, begging for human technical support. The reply came back within an hour. Human technical teams are unavailable for Council operations. For the first time in 300 years, the archive went dark. 1 week after the humans left Centauri Station, Council Speaker Vextar called an emergency session. Only 23 of the 47-member species showed up. The rest had either left the station completely or were too busy dealing with crises back home to attend meetings. The great council chamber felt empty and cold. Where there used to be the busy sounds of dozens of different species working together, now there was only silence and tension. The universal translation system was barely working because Kevin Liu had taken his master control codes with him when he returned to Earth. Vextar looked around at the assembled representatives and tried to hide his growing panic. In just 7 days, the galaxy had started falling apart. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries were breaking down as different species refused to cooperate with each other. Supply chains that human logistics expert Maria Santos had designed were collapsing because nobody else understood how they worked. "We need to discuss the current situation," Vextar announced to the half-empty chamber. His voice echoed strangely without the usual crowd of delegates to absorb the sound. War Chief Grok of the Keth Empire stood up from his massive chair. The reptilian warrior was covered in scars from a dozen different battles, and his yellow eyes glowed with anger. "There is nothing to discuss, Zephyrian. The humans have shown their weakness by running away. The strong survive without help from others." But even as Grok spoke, Vextar knew the Keth were struggling too. Their military forces were having trouble coordinating attacks because their communication systems could not interface with their allies' equipment. Human technicians had always handled those connections. Admiral Splash of the Aquarian Federation made a series of gurgling sounds that the failing translation system barely managed to convert into words. Easy for Keth to say. "Your people live on one world and fight with simple weapons. We Aquarians have colonies in 17 star systems connected by trade agreements that humans designed. Without their economic models, our supply chains are breaking down." The crystalline being called Hexara flickered between red and purple, showing her extreme distress. "The Resonant Collective has lost contact with 4 of our research stations. The communication arrays that connected us were built using human integration protocols. We cannot repair them without human technical knowledge." From the insect section of the chamber came an angry buzzing sound. The hive mind representative spoke through the translation system with their usual mechanical voice. "Hive Mind Collective does not need human assistance. We are self-sufficient and logical." But Vexitar had received reports that 3 hive mind colonies had gone silent in the past 2 days. The complex coordination systems that allowed millions of individual insects to work together were failing without human-maintained relay stations. The meeting was interrupted when alarms started blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as automated systems announced a critical failure in the main power grid. Centauri Station was losing energy fast, and backup systems were not responding properly. Chief Engineer Tokvan of the Mechanical Collective rolled into the chamber on his tracked base. The robot-like being had been trying to fix the station's problems for 3 days without success. "Power grid is failing. Primary fusion reactors are operating at 30% efficiency. Backup systems show multiple compatibility errors." "What does that mean?" Vextar asked, though he already suspected the answer. "It means the station was designed by humans to integrate 17 different power technologies," Tokvan replied. "Without human engineers to maintain the balance between systems, everything is breaking down. We have perhaps 6 hours of emergency power remaining." The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives from different species all started talking at once in their own languages. The failing translation system could not keep up, creating a cacophony of sounds that made communication impossible. Vextar tried to restore order, but his harmony singing only made things worse. The Keth started growling. The Aquarians began making distress calls. The crystal beings flashed angry colors that hurt everyone's eyes. In the confusion, nobody noticed that the hive mind representative had stopped buzzing entirely. The insect creature sat motionless in its chair, cut off from the collective consciousness that gave its species their intelligence. Without the communication networks that humans had built and maintained, Individual hive mind drones became as helpless as lost children. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the real disasters were getting worse. The cargo ship that had been stranded near Beta Centauri had run out of air 2 days ago. 12 different species had sent rescue ships, but they arrived at different times using incompatible docking systems. While the rescuers argued about whose equipment to use, everyone on the cargo ship died. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, the safety systems that humans had insisted on were being removed to increase efficiency. Within hours of the first modifications, a toxic gas leak killed over 200 workers. The mine owners tried to cover up the disaster, but news spread quickly through the underground networks that connected oppressed species across the galaxy. 3 minor species declared independence from the Council that day. The Gentle Shepherds, the Crystal Singers, and the Deep Dwellers announced they would no longer participate in a government that treated their people as disposable workers. Without human diplomats to negotiate compromises, there was no way to convince them to stay. Captain Susan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the EDF horizon and watched 3 different battles happening in the same star system. The Scalers were fighting the Flyers over mining rights. The Swimmers were attacking both groups to protect their colony ships. And in the middle of it all, civilian vessels were trying to escape the combat zone. "Captain," said Communications Officer Peter Brooks, "we are receiving distress calls from 47 different ships requesting immediate assistance." Captain Mitchell looked at the tactical display showing the chaos outside. In the old days, human peacekeeping forces would have moved in immediately to stop the fighting and protect the civilians. Human negotiators would have found a solution that satisfied everyone. Human rescue ships would have evacuated the innocent bystanders. "What are our orders, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Maria Gonzalez from the weapons station. "Observe only," Captain Mitchell replied, repeating the instructions she had received from Earth. "We are not authorized to intervene in Council affairs." But watching was becoming harder every day. The galaxy that humans had helped build was tearing itself apart, and there seemed to be nothing anyone could do to stop it. Back on Centauri Station, the emergency power finally failed. Life support systems switched to backup batteries that would last maybe 12 hours. Gravity generators started fluctuating, making it difficult to walk or fly. The few remaining council representatives gathered in the emergency shelter deep inside the station. Vextar looked around at the frightened faces of beings from 20 different species. Warriors and diplomats, scientists and traders, all of them more advanced than humans in various ways. But none of them knew how to fix the problems they were facing. "Perhaps," Vextar said quietly, "we should consider contacting the humans again." War Chief Grok growled his disapproval, but even he knew they were running out of options. The galaxy was falling apart, and the humans were the only ones who seemed to know how to put it back together. The question was whether humanity would even want to help after the way they had been treated. President Helen Carter sat in her office in the Global Defense Complex in Geneva, reading the latest reports from across the galaxy. The numbers were worse than she had expected, even though this had been exactly what Earth's leadership had predicted would happen. 2 weeks had passed since Ambassador Jake Morrison walked out of the Council negotiations, and the galaxy was in complete chaos. 17 star systems were now in active conflict. Trade between species had dropped by 63%. 3. Entire civilizations had declared independence from the Galactic Council, and 5 more were threatening to follow. "Status report, General," President Carter said to the tall man standing beside her desk. General Nick Thompson had been Earth's head of galactic affairs for 8 years. He had watched humanity slowly become the problem solvers for every crisis, in council space while being treated like junior partners in major decisions. The irony was not lost on him now. "The situation is deteriorating faster than our projections suggested," Thompson reported, pulling up a holographic display that showed the galaxy-wide breakdown. "The Zephyrians have sent their 4th urgent diplomatic inquiry this morning. Speaker Vextar is practically begging us to return to negotiations." President Carter nodded and switched to another report. "What about military conflicts?" "The Keth Empire has invaded 2 Aquarian colonies, claiming they need the water rights for survival. The Mechanical Collective has sealed their borders completely and stopped all trade with organic species. The hive mind colonies have gone silent, which usually means their coordination networks have failed. Dr. Claire Adams, Earth's chief xenobiologist, looked up from her research station in the corner of the office. She had spent 12 years studying alien cultures and societies, trying to understand how humanity fit into the galactic community. Her recent findings were disturbing and enlightening at the same time. "President Carter, I think we need to discuss what we are really seeing here," Dr. Adams said, activating her own holographic display. "This is not just about economics or politics anymore. The alien species are discovering something they never realized before." "What do you mean?" the president asked. Dr. Adams pulled up a complex chart showing the relationships between different council species over the past 50 years. "Look at this data. Before humans joined the council, these species barely interacted with each other. They traded occasionally, fought wars regularly, but there was no real cooperation between them." She highlighted different sections of the chart as she spoke. The Keth and the Aquarians had been enemies for 3 centuries before humans helped them negotiate their first peace treaty. The crystal resonance and the mechanical collective could not even communicate until human engineers built translation interfaces between their completely different technologies. General Thompson studied the chart with growing understanding. "You are saying that humans became the connecting tissue that held the council together?" "Exactly," Dr. Adams replied. "But it goes deeper than that. Every species in the galaxy specialized in what they did best and assumed someone else would handle everything else. The Keth focused on military power. The Aquarians perfected underwater farming. The Mechanicals built efficient factories. But none of them learned how to work with species that were completely different from themselves." President Carter was beginning to see the bigger picture, and humans became the universal translators. "Not just linguistically," Dr. Adams continued, "culturally, politically, and technologically too. We are the only species that actively studies and adapts to other cultures, instead of expecting them to adapt to us. When the council needed someone to mediate between warriors and pacifists, they called humans. When they needed someone to integrate incompatible technologies, they called humans. When they needed someone to find compromises between completely opposite viewpoints, they called humans." The revelation was interrupted when Sam Turner, a young anthropologist from the University of Mars, burst into the office with a datapad in his hands. He had been analyzing communication patterns between council species since the human withdrawal began. "President Carter, I have been studying the social networks that connected different alien civilizations," Sam said excitedly. "I think I figured out why everything is falling apart so quickly." He activated his own display, showing a 3-dimensional map of connections between different species. "This is what the galactic community looked like before humans joined the council 50 years ago. See how each species only connects to maybe 2 or 3 others? Most of the connections are trade relationships or military alliances based on mutual benefit." The display changed to show the same map from 1 month ago. "Now look at this. See how humans have connections to every single species in the council? We became the central hub that allowed all 47 different civilizations to work together as one community." President Carter stared at the display as understanding dawned on her. "We were not just members of the council, we were its nervous system." "That is exactly right," Sam replied. "Every species specialized in what they did best, but humans became the connective tissue. We are the only species that actively learns from everyone else and then teaches what we learned to whoever needs it." Dr. Adams pulled up another chart showing the timeline of galactic crises over the past 50 years. "Look at this pattern. Every major conflict that got resolved peacefully had human mediators involved. Every technological breakthrough that benefited multiple species used human integration methods. Every trade agreement that satisfied parties with completely different needs was designed using human negotiation techniques." General Thompson was looking at military deployment records on his own display. "Even our peacekeeping forces operated differently than traditional galactic military units. Instead of conquering territory or enforcing submission, human forces focused on protecting civilians and creating conditions for peaceful solutions." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Humanity had not just been helping other species solve their problems. They had been teaching the galaxy how to function as a cooperative community instead of a collection of competing civilizations. The question now, President Carter said slowly, is what kind of galaxy do we want to return to? She stood up and walked to the large window that looked out over Lake Geneva. In the distance, she could see the lights of the European Space Agency launch facility where transport ships were preparing for departure to various human colonies throughout the galaxy. We could go back to the old system, she continued. Resume our role as the Council's universal problem solvers and peacekeepers. Except that we will always be taken for granted and dismissed when we try to have equal voice in major decisions. General Thompson shook his head. That would just recreate the same situation that led to this crisis in the first place. Dr. Adams was studying her cultural analysis data again. There might be a third option. What if we do not go back to solving everyone's problems for them? What if we teach them how to solve problems together instead? Sam Turner looked up from his communication network analysis. You mean turn ourselves from problem solvers into teachers? Exactly, Dr. Adams replied. The Council does not need humans to fix everything. It needs to learn how to be what we helped it become, a true cooperative alliance. President Carter turned back to face the group. That would require a fundamental change in how galactic civilization operates. Are we prepared to demand that level of transformation? The alternative is watching everything collapse, General Thompson pointed out. The current crisis proves that the galaxy cannot function without human involvement, but continuing the old system just perpetuates the problem. President Carter nodded slowly. The decision was not an easy one, but the path forward was becoming clear. Humanity would return to the galaxy, but on completely different terms. Instead of being the Council's universal fix-it team, humans would become the teachers who showed other species how to work together as equals. The real question was whether the alien civilizations would be willing to learn. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood outside the great doors of the Galactic Council chamber and took a deep breath. 1 month had passed since he walked out of these same doors, leaving behind 46 alien species to figure out how to run a galaxy without human help. The results had been exactly what Earth's leadership predicted, but seeing the consequences firsthand was still shocking. Centauri Station looked like a disaster zone. Half the docking bays were dark because nobody knew how to maintain the power distribution systems that humans had installed. Emergency repair crews from a dozen different species were working around the clock, but their equipment was not compatible with each other. The elegant corridors that used to hum with activity now echoed with the sounds of arguing voices and failing machinery. Jake was not alone this time. Behind him stood a new human delegation that included diplomatic strategist Tony Garcia, cultural liaison Beth Rodriguez, and technical advisor Mark Thompson. They had spent the past month preparing for this moment, knowing that everything had to be different from before. The doors opened with a mechanical grinding sound that suggested the automatic systems were barely working. Inside the chamber, Jake counted only 19 representatives from the original 47-member species. The rest had either left the station permanently or were too busy dealing with crises at home to attend council meetings. Council Speaker Vextar looked terrible. His blue skin had faded to a sickly gray color, and his tentacles moved with the slow, tired motions of someone who had not slept in weeks. The stress of trying to hold the galaxy together without human help was destroying his health. Ambassador Morrison, Vextar said, and his voice cracked with exhaustion. We are grateful that you have returned to us. Jake took his seat at the human delegation table and looked around the chamber. War Chief Grok of the Keth Empire was missing 3 of his personal guards, probably killed in the territorial conflicts that had erupted across Keth space. Admiral Splash of the Aquarian Federation was making the gurgling sounds that indicated severe dehydration, a sign that her people's water supply systems were failing. Most disturbing of all was the hive mind representative, who sat completely motionless in its chair. Without the communication networks that humans had built and maintained, individual hive mind drones lost their connection to the collective intelligence that made their species functional. We may have been hasty in our previous assessments of human contributions to the Council, Vextar continued, struggling to find words that did not exist in traditional Zephyrian diplomatic language. The concept of admitting mistakes was foreign to his culture, but desperation had forced him to learn new ways of thinking. Jake nodded calmly and activated his data display. We are prepared to resume our council membership under new terms. A ripple of relief passed through the chamber, but Jake held up his hand to indicate he was not finished speaking. However, humanity will no longer function as the council's universal problem-solving service, he continued. Instead, we propose a fundamental change in how galactic civilization operates. War Chief Grok leaned forward in his massive chair. What do you mean by fundamental change? Tony Garcia stood up and activated a holographic display showing the galaxy-wide breakdown that had occurred over the past month. The current crisis has revealed a critical weakness in council structure. Every species has become dependent on human mediation and technical support without learning how to perform these functions themselves. Beth Rodriguez added her own analysis. Our anthropological studies show that most council species have never developed the cultural skills necessary for cross-species cooperation. You have relied on humans to bridge the gaps between your different ways of thinking and operating. The chamber fell silent as the alien representatives absorbed this information. It was not an accusation they could easily deny, given the chaos that had erupted the moment humans withdrew their support. What are you proposing? Asked Counselor Hexara of the crystal resonance. Her crystalline body was flickering between colors, showing her anxiety about the answer. Jake stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. We propose a complete restructuring of council operations based on shared knowledge instead of specialized dependence. He gestured toward the empty seats around the chamber. Dr. Amy Watson will return to council space, but instead of simply treating medical emergencies, she will establish training programs that teach representatives from every species how to handle health crises that affect multiple biological types. The holographic display changed to show technical schematics. Captain Danny Foster will come back to help repair your infrastructure, but his primary mission will be mentoring engineering teams from across the galaxy. Instead of humans fixing everything, we will teach you how to fix things yourselves. Mark Thompson activated another display showing communication network designs. Kevin Liu will rebuild the translation systems that connect your species, but this time he will train technicians from every civilization to maintain and improve the networks independently. The implications were staggering. Instead of calling humans whenever problems arose, the alien species would need to develop their own expertise in cross-cultural cooperation, technical integration, and diplomatic mediation. Admiral Splash made a series of rapid gurgling sounds that the translation system converted into words. This would require massive changes in how our societies operate. We would need to train our people in skills we have never developed. That is exactly the point, Beth Rodriguez replied. The current system creates dependency that makes the entire galaxy vulnerable to collapse whenever one key species withdraws. True cooperation requires shared knowledge and mutual capability. War Chief Grok growled his disapproval. The Keth Empire is strong enough to survive without help from others. We do not need to learn alien ways of thinking. Jake looked at the Keith leader with steady eyes. Then why are 3 of your colony worlds currently fighting civil wars because your military commanders cannot coordinate with your supply ships? Your strength means nothing if you cannot organize it effectively. The brutal honesty silenced Grok's objections. Everyone in the chamber knew that the Keth military machine had ground to a halt without human logistical support. Vexitar raised one trembling tentacle. What you are proposing would take years to implement. How do we prevent further collapse while these changes are being made? Human specialists will provide emergency support during the transition period, Jake replied. But their primary focus will be teaching, not fixing. Every problem they solve must be used as a training opportunity for local teams. Tony Garcia pulled up a detailed timeline. We estimate 18 months for basic cross-species cooperation training, 3 years for technical integration programs, and 5 years for full diplomatic mediation capability. During this time, human advisors will work alongside teams from every council species. The chamber buzzed with discussion as representatives considered the proposal. It was not what they had hoped for when they begged humanity to return. They had wanted their problems solved quickly and easily, not a complete transformation of galactic civilization, but they also knew they had no choice. The past month had proven that the galaxy could not function without human involvement, and humans were no longer willing to be taken for granted. I call for a vote, Vexitar announced. All in favor of accepting the human proposal for restructured council operations. One by one, Every representative in the chamber raised their hand, tentacle, wing, or appendage in agreement. For the first time in galactic history, a council vote was unanimous without any human mediation required. As Jake Morrison took his seat with the new human delegation, he noticed something different in the chamber's atmosphere. Instead of the usual expectation that humans would solve their problems, there was a sense of nervous anticipation about learning to solve problems together. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in 50 years, the galaxy had a chance to become truly cooperative instead of merely dependent. And deep in space, new civilizations preparing for first contact would find a very different kind of welcome waiting for them.